So last night at around 11:40 p.m, the government announced that they will increase the seller stamp duty period from 3 to 4 years. Why did they do it and how will the market respond? Let's dive in. So effective today, 4th of July, the seller stamp duty period will be increased from 3 years to 4 years, with the rates increasing by 4% for each year. However, this is not a new cooling measure, but instead a return to pre-2017 seller stamp duty rates. So we have been in this time period before where seller stamp duty is 4 years instead of 3 years, which is between 2010 all the way until 2017. A good 7 years. What is seller stamp duty? Seller stamp duty is a tax on homeowners who sell their property within a specified holding period. For example, with the new rates as of today, 4th of July, if someone intends to sell between 1 to 2 years from the date of purchase, they will now incur a 12% tax on the sale price. So seller stamp duty also mainly just affects private property because HDB properties are subjected to the 5-year minimum occupation period. However, seller stamp duties are different from the minimum occupation period because unlike the minimum occupation period, you still can sell your private property within this holding period if you are okay on paying the tax. So why did the government decide to revert the seller stamp duty to 4 years instead of 3 years? Taking reference from the news release, the main reason is that the number of private residential property transactions with short holding periods has increased sharply. In particular, the government is concerned with the significant increase in the subsale market. So what are subsale properties? Subsale properties are new properties that have not attained the Certificate of Statutory Completion, or in short, CSC. This is the final stage of the progressive payment scheme where the title is transferred from the developer to the homeowner. So reverting the seller stamp duty back to 4 years is mainly targeting the new launch market, although there will be resale properties sold within the shorter holding periods as well. So using the typical progressive payment milestones, it takes about 4 years from the project's launch to attain the Certificate of Statutory Completion. This means that your subsale units are typically sold before the 4 years mark. So on the right here, I plot out the number of subsale transactions dating all the way back from 2014 until today. Before 2017, seller stamp duty was actually also at 4 years. And it was only then that the government decided to reduce the seller stamp duty from 4 to 3 years. In the years since COVID, subsale transactions have indeed rocketed, from a low of 177 units in 2020 to a high of about 1,300 units last year. This year alone, we have already almost 500 subsale units. So since subsale properties are typically sold before the 4 years mark, people that have purchased from 2017 onwards would have contributed to this large spike in subsale transactions. Furthermore, we haven't taken into account macroeconomic conditions then, such as the low interest rate environment during the COVID era. But why are subsale transactions a problem? So the government has consistently stated in the past few years that they will continue to promote a steady and sustainable property market for the benefit of both current and future generations. This means that they will not let property prices run beyond economic fundamentals, just as what former Minister of National Development Desmond Lee said in one of his speeches in 2023. So in order to ensure a steady and sustainable property market, the government needs to ensure that the property market grows according to economic fundamentals, which means that they have to curb excessive speculation in the market. Hence, shorter holding periods and an increase in the subsale transactions are seen as signs of speculation that could push prices beyond fundamentals. So how will the market respond? What I've done in this chart is to map out the number of subsale transactions in each year in blue and the total number of new launches that were sold 3 years prior. Why 3 years prior? This is because the number of subsale transactions for a given year would be a result of new launches that would have been launched roughly 3 years before. So if we look at the percentage of subsale transactions compared to the new launches sold, you can see that the subsale transactions are a minority, with the highest being at about 11% in 2023 and last year at 8%. With the increase in the seller stamp duty period from 3 to 4 years, it seems that the government will be more comfortable if subsale transactions hover around the 2 to 3% mark. One other insight is that the majority of people who purchase new launches actually do not sell in the subsale market, and in fact, they have a longer holding period. So this to me is akin to the government trimming the excess fats of over-speculation in the market, rather than it affecting a large proportion of home buyers. Furthermore, we must take this into context of how the property market is actually faring. Just roughly 3 days ago, the URA actually released a flash estimate for the second quarter of 2025, which showed that the overall prices of private residential property have continued to moderate in the latest quarter compared to the previous 2 quarters in the first quarter of 2025 and the fourth quarter of 2024. In addition, when you look at the macroeconomy, they have also stated that Singapore's GDP growth is expected to moderate from last year due to the uncertain economic environment. As a result of the expected economic slowdown, do you know that interest rate packages have continued to dip? For example, variable rate packages are now roughly about 2.5%, while fixed rate packages are hovering at also about the same rate at 2.4 or 2.5%. This marks a steep decrease compared to the past 2 years. So overall, this change in the seller stamp duty aims to do 2 things. First, it is a structural weeding out of the 3-year flip strategy, as the government has deemed this as over-speculation in the market. Secondly, the government is also proactively preparing for a cyclical shift in the consumer demand due to falling interest rates. Increasing the holding period for the seller stamp duty as interest rates continue to fall should help to reduce further speculative buying in the market. However, just like past changes to cooling measures, initial reactions would be that consumer demand could drop in the short term as the market digests this information. But is this a good or a bad thing for you? As every person's portfolio is different, message me if you'd like to discuss further. See you in the next one.